Hello, my name is Celina, and I'm a part of the Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles webinar team at the Foundation for Inner Peace. The mission of the foundation is to publish, distribute, and discuss A Course in Miracles. And we hold these Let's Discuss online webinars to express our vision of extending love through A Course in Miracles teachings. Today, we're bringing you gratitude as attitude, appreciation as the pathway home. Today's event is coming to you live and will be just about 90 minutes long. We want to thank all who submitted questions in advance on this topic. And also for those who are attending live with us, our question and answer feature is available on this platform. So as we have time, we will take a few questions. So please submit them using the Q&A button at the edge of your screen. Today's conversation will be presented in English, but we also have a live simultaneous Spanish translation available for the viewing audience. Attendees can listen to Spanish by selecting the interpretation button in the webinar controls and selecting the Spanish channel. For those listening live, we will paste these instructions in the group chat. Before introducing our guests, I invite you to join in prayer. From the text in chapter 2, the Course tells us that we can do much on behalf of our own healing and that of others if we think of our situations in this way. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal. Now it's time for today's Let's Discuss session. As we approach the U.S. celebration of Thanksgiving, we're invited to reflect on one of the Course's most powerful teachings, gratitude. But what does gratitude really mean in the context of A Course in Miracles? Is it a positive attitude, or is it something much deeper? Is it a true pathway home? In the world, we often associate gratitude with comparing ourselves to others or feeling thankful for material things. But the Course challenges us to see gratitude as something far more profound. It tells us in the workbook in lesson 195, love is the way I walk in gratitude. And this love isn't about external circumstances. It's about recognizing the eternal truth of our shared being. So today, we'll explore what it means to walk in gratitude as we navigate our relationships with others, even when faced with the temptation of anger, hurt, or resentment. How can we let go of the world's definitions of gratitude and instead embrace the more profound spiritual truth that the Course invites us into? So we are honored to have a diverse panel of Course practitioners with us today, including the distinct perspectives from both the Foundation for Inner Peace and the Circle of Atonement. Together, we'll deepen our understanding of how to truly walk in gratitude and let it lead us to the peace and oneness we all seek. So, without further ado, welcoming today's panelists is a true pleasure. And I am joined today by Foundation President Tam Morgan, course teachers Emily and Robert Perry, and Leon Joel Russell. Hello, everyone, and welcome to you all.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, I think I'm going to begin here on 2 counts, and it will be lengthier than I will want, but here we go. First of all, I want to say I have gratitude for this gathering, for you each coming. I got a couple of emails saying, are you out of your mind? Why are you having Emily and Robert come when they disagree so completely with Ken's teachings? And how could you do that? And my response was really, I hope I'm out of my mind, because really want to come from the heart, and we can disagree about things and still be of one heart. And that is my continual practice. Is, for me, I find it boring if everyone has the exact same way of thinking as I do. So even with the course and its interpretations, I don't think anyone quite realized that Ken, as this phenomenal course teacher, also had his interpretations. He was the first of them. So we think they were untouchable. And for him and his students, they are, and that's fantastic. But I also know there were things that my mother disagreed with Ken about, but she wasn't very confrontational. And she would say to me often, people keep saying to me, well, Ken studied with Helen. And she said, oh, I was right there too. So she had some different opinions. Bob Rosenthal had different opinions from both of them. And thus, here we are. We're in ego form. And the moment we step in, we have different opinions. And if they're the same, it's like telling someone, you have such good taste. I like how you decorated your house. It's only because they share it with you. So I am opening this up for that. I'll also say that my practice of gratitude, and really deep gratitude, has been heightened in the past 24 hours because I came up to some property that we had to do something, and it was just going to be a short visit. So I left it 5 a.m. yesterday morning, and there was a huge rainstorm, and I saw things don't travel, and it's like, oh, it's just rain. And I get up near the property, and there's a big tree branch in the middle of the road, and it's totally blocking my car. I get out, try and move it. It's pouring. I can't move it. And I go back in and say, well, we practice a kind of mind training. I'm going to do a little variant. I could ask for a miracle. I did. And I'm sitting there. It's still there. No one's come, no other cars. And then I thought, oh, wait a second. This is our belief system. So I decided to be a method actor and pretend that my baby was under a car with all that adrenaline. And it took me about 10 minutes to get the adrenaline. And I ran out and I moved the tree branch just enough for my car to go in a ditch and go around it. And then I got to this place, and everything was flooding, and continual all day flooding, and I couldn't leave. Still can't. Electricity off, electricity on. If you see me disappear, it will be because of that. But within this, and no food, except I finally found today something from one of the essential food groups, which is a stale old Reese's peanut butter cup. I'm saving for when I'm desperate. But in any case, the gratitude first was, how can this happen? And I have to be on a podcast this morning, at a webinar, and what's going on? You know, how can I have been so dumb to come up here in a major rainstorm? And then I stopped and thought, no, I am so grateful for every single bit of this, because it's for me. It's for my own good. It's for me to remember who I really am, which is love, whether a tree falls, whether you can hear it or you can't hear it, whether it's flooding. And it's and the flooding is also, it's been so dry that it's abundance. It's just a lot. So I just wanted to open this up of how to be grateful here. I'm also grateful in a really true way that I am not my mother, who never would have shown up without her Revlon number 9 lipstick on. And I haven't showered in 2 days, and you're seeing me in a jumpsuit. So so there's a lot of funny things to be grateful for, but deeper than that, it is the gratitude to just be here doing this work and open to love and to remembering who we are. And that's what the course practice continually teaches and applies. Unless you guys disagree.
Well, of course, we don't believe in gratitude of any sort. Well, you know, we're very grateful to be here, and gratitude is a great topic in the course. Since you broached the subject, I will say that, you know, from our standpoint, it doesn't really matter what a person has said about the course. You know, we're all trying to get as close as we can to what the course is really teaching. But what matters is what it says. We've got hundreds of pages. And surely you know, whoever said something, whether we said something ourselves, what matters is what the book says.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that as well and say that I'm also grateful to be here with all of you and to meet new course friends, and also to have, I'm so grateful that this year, Tam, you especially have gone from being a course colleague to a real friend. And so that's been a real highlight for us this year, and we're especially grateful for that.
Thank you. Yes, we share laughter in all of this, which really matters a lot. And I will say, in the agreeing and disagreeing and all of that, I actually care less, and I know it's your passion, so I don't want to step on any toes. I care less about exactly what the notes say and what version we were given to publish than I care if it teaches you how to love. If it teaches whatever one it is, whatever interpretation someone has. I think there are facts that can be truly discussed and challenged in a very fair-minded way. But the bottom line is, what are we paying attention to? Is this teaching you to remember who you are, to be in forgiveness and love? And that's just my particular bent on it. So I think what you do and your passion for the way that you get into the weeds is fantastic for what you are chosen to do. And I want to say on record here that I had a very deep experience when I kept asking Spirit about the course and different versions and you know, the stolen ones and the this ones and all the stories about it. And I got very clearly from Spirit saying, do you think that I am so weak that I would allow something to be taken that wasn't supposed to be? Do you think that I am so weak that other people and their versions will distort or be different or actually maybe need to be said? And it was very profound for me. And so that's, I either believe that everything is perfect or I don't. And if I believe that everything is perfect, what I'm doing is perfect and what you're doing is perfect. And that's where I come from and care most about. And go forth and show every little mistake and switch it, because for some people that will matter tremendously. And for others, what matters is that Helen said, this is the version to publish. So that's what we do. But there's room for everyone in this. And even if we don't agree with some of it, there's room for all of it. And I hope that as we move forward, we pay more attention to A Course in Miracles as a whole and the sectors, because then we get into religion and what happened with Christianity. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in seeing the delight of getting to know you guys. That's so much gratitude, because there was so much distance. And Leon, we have nothing against you, so you're really a bystander here. Sorry. Come on in.
Well, I think for me, gratitude, first and foremost, to Celina for giving me a few weeks notice before I came on, because although I've had the course since 1993, I've obviously never opened it and never read it, because I got this sense that it was going to take some of my enjoyment away from the world. And I remember, like, one of the early statements, and it said the central lesson the course wants to teach is there is no world. And I'd not recently opened the curtains and turned the light on and sort of put the TV on. I was thinking, there is no world, you know, obviously that's not true. So I've had a few weeks to Google what's in the Course in Miracles, and to try and sort of brush up a little bit so that I don't feel too out my depth. But I think it's helped me in the last 30 years, because in Brighton in England is like probably the biggest spiritual community in this country. So when you're going into meditation centers or cafes and you've got a copy of A Course in Miracles with you, and you order a spiced pumpkin latte or some sort of kale smoothie or something, and you just say, you know, I'll just put my copy of A Course in Miracles down on this table over here, you know, quite loudly so everyone can hear it. So it's been a wonderful sort of badge to wear on my lapel for my holy ego. But it was nice to have a few weeks to try and brush up on it before we got going tonight.
And what did you come up with?
Yeah, in lightness and laughter is sin gone, because its quaint absurdity is seen. Well, yeah.
So one of the quotes that I love is, I do not need gratitude, meaning God does not need gratitude. Jesus does not need gratitude, but you need to develop your weakened ability to be grateful, or you cannot appreciate God. What does that mean to you guys?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is we had done a workshop. It turns out it was 3 years ago today on gratitude. And so we did a real deep dive into the subject. And even though there's an affirmation, a very, robust affirmation in the course of gratitude, just like in our culture, we're starting to realize that there is a real basis in improved happiness and mental health for focusing on gratitude. The course's approach is so different. Normally it's just assumed that we should be grateful for the good things that happen in our lives. And the course has a whole different basis for gratitude. And it seems helpful to me to think of it as twofold. One is we're grateful for eternal things. We're grateful for God. We're grateful for our true nature as He created us. We're grateful for others and for who they really are. We're grateful for their gifts and even their attacks, which is an interesting teaching. We're grateful for our journey to God through this world. So we're grateful for eternal things, but also for our gains along the path, for all the help we get along the path. And because we have a different basis for gratitude in the course, because it's grounded really in the nature of reality, the course talks about us basically having a constant song of gratitude or a song of thankfulness, because the basis for it is always there. It's not like, well, today I got that raise, so I can be grateful today, but then tomorrow, who knows? We can have a constant song of gratitude. And I mean, I don't live like that. I would like to, to live like that, but just imagining that we could be in an endless song of thanks because of things that are always true, because of the journey that we're on to God, it's a remarkable idea.
Yeah, and the course has, as Robert is saying, such different ideas than we do about what we should ultimately be thankful for. At the beginning of that workshop that we hosted 3 years ago, we asked participants to just list 10 things that you're grateful for in your life. And we went around the horn and people shared what they had written down. And it's the usual suspects. It's the things that we're all grateful for our relationships, for our safety, for our home, for our food. These are the things that our health, these are the things that we tend to think about when we think, what am I grateful for? But when you get into the course, it's these things of God, these things that are eternal. That's what it's asking us to be grateful for the fact that God has saved us from the self that we thought we made, to be grateful for the Holy Spirit to guide us out of this mess, to be grateful for the fact that we are always eternally safe, no matter what happens in this world, to be grateful for our true nature as God created us, to be grateful for the true nature of everyone else. And the Course says that when we truly understand who we really are, the natural response to that is gratitude. And so no matter what's happening externally, we can walk around with an attitude of gratitude because we're aware of what's the deeper truth of what's going on here versus what our physical eyes tell us is true.
I love the whole, and you can tell me if I'm wrong too. I love the notion that that gratitude is like one of the holiest prayers. And it's not, can I have this? Can I have that? It's thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That touches, it always touched me really deeply.
There's so much thankfulness in I'm a big fan of the prayers in part 2 of the workbook. And there's so much thanks and gratitude in those prayers.
Yeah, and in fact, we were talking about this today, that when you do the hourly remembrance practice in the workbook, part of that is giving thanks for the hour gone by and asking for guidance for the hour ahead. And so as part of course practice, every hour there's gratitude built into it in the workbook, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's called at one point our hourly Thanksgiving. Like not an annual Thanksgiving, but an hourly Thanksgiving.
Yeah, even minute by minute, no, until it becomes second by second. And it kind of somehow intersects with this. It's the prayer, the Avinu Malkeinu in Judaism, where that day of Yom Kippur, where you look at everything that you've done, that all of the things that you'd like to change for the future, and you ask God to forgive you for everything you've done in the traditional sense of, patriarchal forgiveness in a certain way, but you can go deeper with it. But what I love about it is embedded in that prayer is, and please forgive me for everything I'm going to do in the next year of how I break my vows. And I'm so human. And I always found that that felt like spirit to me. That sounded true. Yes, we're human. Yes, we're going to do this. We're going to try and practice, but there is this underlying, thank you for being there to forgive me next year. Unless, of course, it writes you out of the book of life and then death,
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Now we're eternal, it's all okay. But so give me an example, and then we have to hear more from Leon, but give me an example, Robert, because you're so good at this. What's your favorite prayer that is of gratitude, specifically in the lessons?
Well, I like one that says, we thank you, Father, that we cannot lose the memory of you and of your love. Mm-hmm. It goes on, but a lot of them start with thanks. There's one where we thank God for today, because this day is holy, because we were born into this world to achieve the progress we'll make today. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of beautiful prayers of thanks. And, just thinking about the title we have for this, Gratitude as Attitude, it's really apt, because in the Course, gratitude is kind of a replacement for another global attitude we have, which is basically like the world's dumping on us. Mm-hmm. Our spouse is not treating us well, everything's going wrong, we're not being treated fairly. And that attitude is kind of universal to some degree. And the idea that we could be going around singing a song of gratitude instead is a complete reversal of that normal, I'm so put upon attitude.
Ill victim.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the opposite of what we call victim consciousness.
Our favorite little friend. Yeah. Leon, you come on in.
Yeah, so interesting. I'm thinking about the ego as like an activity of mind rather than an entity. And I often say to people about the Holy Spirit is almost like an inactivity, because of the presence of the Holy Spirit in our minds as being something stable and consistent. And therefore, with gratitude, there's a sense of directionality. So you could, in a temporal sense, consider gratitude to have a direction or a movement outward into the future, or it can sit and be where you are because you're already in possession of everything. And in the Course, where it will say always has no direction, then obviously there's that understanding that we're already in possession of everything because we were given everything in our creation. But we are also in the world of form as we perceive it at the moment. you know, using language loosely, but we are here and we're trying to work our way through navigating through situations. And then when we start to look at the inactivity of mind that the Holy Spirit enables us to gain access to through its presence, then we do have this unification of purpose, the same as we do with the ego in the course, where it will say mind reaches to itself. And you know, mind is pure abstraction. On that level, we have a total perception. It's 100% fear if you're in ego, or it's 100% love if you're in Holy Spirit, inactivity of mind. So therefore, everything that you look upon witnesses and testifies to one of those two thought systems. So then we can look at things that, if you had a hierarchy to illusions, you could say, this is good, this is bad, this is not so good. But really, you know, you could say if you've got an illness, everything is going to either serve you in your awakening, or everything is going to keep you asleep. So I think there's a totality to perception that you can then apply. So that gratitude, as it say in the lesson that Celina quoted, gratitude can only be sincere if it's joined with love, in lesson 195, I think. And again, the way I walk, love is the way I walk in gratitude. So I was, you know, guided to sort of break that down and think love is, God is, in the same way it says God is, and we cease to speak. So love is the way, and you could come back to always has no direction. So there is no way, in a sense, because there's no alternate way, there is only love. The way I walk, we don't walk because we're not really in a body. At no single point does the body exist. It's either remembered or anticipated. Love is the way I walk in gratitude. And then I'm thinking gratitude, kind of like a safe cracker, thinking you're twisting the dial, trying to crack into a safe and get access to the love. Is it the action of twisting the dial that gives you the gratitude that's going to get you to the love? Or when you find the sweet spot on the dial, does that bring the gratitude into your awareness? And then you get access to the love. But the gratitude is present all the time because love's present all the time. And it's only our perception of obstacles and blocks that would make us think that it's not.
And have you had any recent challenges where you have not felt that?
Yeah, we've had the last 4 months of really challenging experiences, with my wife's mum passing away unexpectedly, and then my father-in-law having really accelerated dementia and really suffering, and lots of stuff for him that's really really awful for him from his perception. So for us to like watch that play out, to keep your heart open, to see what's going on behind the scenes as such, the script beneath the script, if you like, with fatigue, like really tired. So, you know, those challenges when you are really tired and when you're worn down and you've got to dig deep to get back on the good foot, then yeah, definitely in the last 4 months, it's been nothing but that. To then find the gratitude to say, for example, the way that all the relationships in our family unit have evolved at like an amazing kind of rate as a consequence of my mother-in-law dying. You know, she's passed away, and now everybody else have pulled together with such unity, and everybody's strengths have come to the table, and we've been unified in the tasks at hand. And I'd say that everybody's got a stronger relationship as a consequence of that, which in worldly sense, you could say, well, that's a bit perverse, really. So someone's died and you're all better for it. But that is actually what we've experienced.
So we have a lot of pragmatic questions that will be coming up, but I'd love to hear from any of you where you would take this on a deeper note.
I'll just echo something that Leon just said in relation to, you mentioned fatigue, and I hope you don't care that I share, our community knows that Robert has had what we assume is chronic post-viral fatigue for the past 3 months. And it has been frightening for us, because when your body is failing you, you really, I likened it to getting down to the studs of who you are as a person. You realize how much you really are leaning on your faith and how much you are descending into fear. And so what we discovered as well is what Leon was saying, that in the middle of these times where everything is so uncertain and you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, if you can find something in the middle of it that can hold and be grateful for that, then you can find your way through. And one of the things that we were grateful for in Robert's health condition is that the illness made him and I softer with each other. And in that place, we actually, like, we got closer during an illness. And what has been so beautiful, and we were already very close, but what's been so beautiful is that softness and that closeness has held even as he's gotten better. And so going through these tough times, these dark nights of the soul, can change us in ways that ultimately become beneficial, and we can have gratitude for that. It's hard to touch when you're in the middle of it, but if you can get to the other side and look back and say, you know what, I'm not only different, but I'm better because of this hard time, then it's getting us closer to love, as you said, Tam.
And I think that's just it too. It's looking back, it's a lot easier. But when you're in it, that's what the course is for. You know, that's the applied moments to really try. And sometimes it feels absolutely impossible. And for me, I've really noticed, you know, I've had a connection to spirit that's been very loud inside me for my whole life, except when I went on thyroid medication, and it literally wiped it out. And it was the only time in my life I was very, very dark, and I went off the thyroid medication and realized, oh, thank God that was the medication. But the compassion that I have for people with mental illness, who, or anyone who doesn't have a connection where they can just talk to spirit whenever they want, doesn't have to be a mental illness, can be a totally healthy person, that the cultivating of that kind of goes in some weird partnership with, and you can tell it to me exactly where it's from, but I will not leave you comfortless. That line in the course, which was so profound that I know my mother and stepfather used it for their wedding vows. And yeah, it just, and they used it in the deepest way and the most literal way, such as they could. But that helps. It helps to keep cultivating that, as well as the reminder that this is not real, but it sure is feeling it. And all of my body responses are making me feel it's real. As I had to sit and pretend I was having a baby under a car to move a tree, you know, like, look what happens when we can pretend something is real and it's not, even just to do that. And so that reminder in any way possible during those hard times make an enormous difference. Or they don't, but you can see it later. And don't get upset with yourself if you don't see it during and you're trying.
Yeah, and that idea of I will not leave you comfortless, that we have a way out of the madness. We have the Holy Spirit, we have the course itself, and we should all, I think, as course students, be so grateful that we have this 2,000-page way out of the madness, because the world is truly insane. And if you have this pathway out and you follow it, then you really can get out of that insanity. And I thank God every day for that path and for that way.
I was very, very struck by in our election that all of these people that I knew were feeling excited one moment, and then the next moment they weren't. And they were depressed, and nothing changed on the actual outside. You know, nothing was different except from information came through to their brains, my brain. And what I noticed was that the more I could myself and remind people, if they wanted to hear it, to be in the present, in the gratitude of this moment. Nothing has happened to me right this moment. And all of this of, you know, some people feeling, depending upon which way you were in the election and who you were voting for, you know, some people felt like, oh, the boogeyman is coming now. I'm terrified. Everything is going to be terrifying. And the other way, last time, you know, when Trump lost the election, it was, you know, a whole bunch of like, oh no, now life is going to be so much worse. And life does seem on the outside to get worse or better depending upon where your perspective is. But it is kind of funny how just a piece of information can completely change your entire mood, state of mind, and physical well-being when nothing has actually really happened in that moment other than that piece of information, which is the metaphor of the course itself, because none of this is real, and yet we are reacting so intimately and aggressively with our dream.
Yeah, I'll just say that, you know, I think there are, if we're undergoing something ourselves, it can be hard to be grateful for those eternal things, right? I mean, you know, the election hasn't affected me personally, just like it hasn't affected you personally, although it may. But I know that undergoing the health situation that Emily was talking about, it was harder to hang on to those eternal things. What was easier in those moments was hanging on to the gains. Like, you know, we sometimes talk about how the course is essentially talking about two different journeys that we're on. We're all focused on the journey of our external lives. How's it going? You know, how's the job going? How's the household going? And the course is focused on the spiritual journey that we're making. And so even if the outward journey isn't going so well, we may be making important gains on the spiritual journey and being thankful for those. Like Leon has said something similar and Emily said something along those lines. That can really see us through that kind of gratitude. Things we have made progress on, loving gifts we have received from others or given to others, all those things that may not show up that much in terms of the outer journey of our lives, they can be, and I think they are, the most important things. And so I think that's a form of gratitude that is immediate and accessible and very meaningful.
Yeah, I know my mother was a big proponent of act as if and you will become. And even when she was sick, she was suddenly okay if the phone rang. You know, there was something that dynamically, I called it her spiritual override, that could shift. And I was intrigued by that. And she kind of taught me that ability as well. And again, what does that say? Here you are really sick, but you know, my grandmother was having a heart attack and insisted that I get her lipstick on as the paramedics were coming in, and she's literally having a massive heart attack saying, hello, boys. And like how we navigate, if we, I've been taught in most circumstances to find humor even amidst my own illnesses. that I had. And the gratitude about that is a huge coping mechanism to remember what is really here. And that brings in the element of faith and a little willingness of, no matter how sick I am, I trust this. I trust that whatever this is for my higher purpose. I can't see it right now, and I don't like it, but I really trust this is for my well-being, and I'll find out later because I don't know now. And I will never forget being in Nepal, and people were teasing me about going for enlightenment, and I was 19 years old, and I thought, good, yeah, I'd like to go wake up in Nepal. And I was standing by the side of the road, and I was totally throwing up, vomiting. I had diarrhea all at once on the side of a road, and I'm crouched over, and someone pushed me with a stick. And in Nepal, he said the equivalent of, how's it going? How's the family? And I'm thinking, you just violated me. How could you ask me that when I am in this state? It's so horrible. And I turned and looked up angrily, like, get away from me. And I saw this old man, totally disfigured. He had a goiter this size coming out of his neck. His eye was completely crusted over with conjunctivitis, one eye. And he had this stick for a cane, and he was not walking well. And he had the light of the world in his eyes, and he was smiling. And that was my enlightenment, Nepal. Like, in that second, it was, oh yeah, this is okay. This can be funny. And I started to laugh with him, which was enlightenment for me, considering everything else coming out of me that laughter could join. But if it can't, there really is that willingness to give it over and to trust that it's for our own good.
Also, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I was just going to say, I love that you've brought in little willingness, because where my thinking was going then is I'm a professionally trained celebrant, so I lead sort of funerals, and this is a very delicate tightrope to walk. Obviously we know with the metaphysics of the course and the way certain people would walk into like a funeral and sort of go, what are you all crying for? No one's died. We like, dude, come on, that's cruel. That's not the way to go. So there's this very, very sort of sensitive tightrope to walk in that scenario. And in order to be more helpful with the families and with the people that I'm working with, and my leaning was to go into grief and bereavement counselling and start to study that as well. And one of the things that cropped up, which in our course talk, I guess, would be the little willingness, is when you are trying to rebuild yourself to find a new normal after a terrible bereavement or loss, the emphasis on just having a drink of water, having the right amount of drinks of water, eating some food every day, showering, those three things which you could almost sort of frame in a way where you go, really? You want to mention that? You're going to bring that up? These people are heartbroken. But those tiny little allowances to let something in and to build some propulsion again from the freeze of shock and terror and grief, they create this little glitch. And then if you come back to course talk again and think there's no degrees, there's no small upsets, to allow those three things in your day where you will drink, eat, and clean yourself opens the floodgates, which will soon turn into finding a way to move forwards in the whole scenario, if you like.
Yeah, it's very form and content, where if you understand that at the level of content, the level of spiritual reality, all is well. God has our safety guaranteed, and there's nothing that we can do to mar our perfection and our innocence, and there's nothing that others can do to mar theirs. And so if you can walk knowing that he's got the ultimate safety net, then it enables you to go into this world of form and actually make a difference in the lives of other people, to bring the healing to the world that I believe the course is asking us to bring. And so when you can hold both of those things as true at the same time, that there is work for us to do in the world to heal, but we're coming from this place of ultimate safety, then there is much to be grateful for, indeed.
As long as you don't mistake your codependent caregiving personality for that work. You know, it really has, you have to hear, why are you doing this? Is it to be closer to someone? Is it to get to be controlling of someone else's life? Is it, there's a lot of underside that can come with the loftiest of notions to do something, whereas if it comes from the heart, there's nothing that would stop you. It's not for that goal. It's literally for, that's what gratitude is.
Yeah, we're doing a book club now where we're talking about special relationship. And if you are in a relationship to get, if you're doing things in order to pull love out of someone else, then you're not really giving. And you know it, they know it. But if you're in that place where you don't care who gains, you're just giving for the sake of giving, you're not giving to get, then you know you're in that true space and not in that codependent space that you were talking about, Tam. That's a tough place to be.
Oh, but yeah. I mean, for me, it was definitely a journey because it was mixed in certain times in my life. And I really had to see that sometimes my codependent behavior was infantilizing someone and not believing that they couldn't do it themselves, and letting them become dependent on me because I so know how to take care of them. And, you know, it again, it's always about asking and seeing what's really going on in you as you're doing it. It sure seems like love, but if it's not clean, it's not. It's some other motive.
Yeah, I understand that.
Well, I'll say that Emily nursed me through that time and was amazing. And I don't think she was, you know, codependent. She was just a great caregiver.
I certainly believe that. You know,
So, go ahead.
and when one knows it, like I was caregiving my father, who was a very challenging, difficult man. And people kept saying to me, why are you doing this? He's abusive to you. And you're going back east for a week out of every month. And he's horrible. And you come home like completely wrecked. And my attitude about it was a lot of gratitude for just that he was my father. But also attitude that he was not the father I wanted in many ways. But the bigger part of it was I was very clear that I wasn't a saint. I was doing it because I wanted to be guilt-free after he was gone. And that was a specific goal. And that's different in a way than, you know, just pure love. Okay, I'm just going to do this and take abuse and it doesn't matter. I was really clear because Spirit told me, you can do this work now, you won't have to later. And you could always do it, you know, on a level where I didn't even interact with my father, but he was there and I was actually grateful to use him for that lesson. And so it wasn't a codependent. I don't think it was the purest saint that other people thought I might be. It wasn't. But there was something in there that was absolutely pure. And it's just being able to be comfortable saying, okay, that's what it is. That's why I'm doing it. And clean up as much as you can along the way.
And what is totally pure in this world? I mean, our motives are a work in progress.
Yeah. Well, Spirit, if you can connect.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where the guidance is.
Yeah.
At least for me in that. Yeah. So, well,
Yeah, I'm reminded of our Miracle Voices, Tam, with Matt and you and myself, from talking about my dad and his addiction with heroin and alcohol and the effects that that had on our family unit, and the journey that that took me on. And then one of the things that I reflected upon that was to bring into the sort of explanation of Jesus and Judas, really, and talk about the disciples, and say to people, like, you know, when you think of the 12 disciples, Judas is the one that normally comes to mind first for most people, and Judas represents the most challenging people to be brushing up against in our lives. And my dad was certainly the most challenging person that I've had to brush up against. But there was a sense that he played a role for me which enabled me to clear a massive amount of interference and a massive amount of fear. And therefore, I'm extremely grateful to him for wanting to play that role, you know. And there's other people in your life, and I sort of mention it to people and say, if you were looking at taking a role in someone else's life and you had a choice and you'd said, oh, I'd quite like to be the person who is your best mate. I'd like to be the person who you go out for lunch with once a week. You know, I'd like to be the person who completely tears your family apart and destroys the home, and AB's, you know, really, what, you want to do that job, you know? And what did Jesus say to Judas? He just said, brother, do what you came here to do. It's like, he didn't make any judgment call. He didn't create a hierarchy to illusions. But this person who offered him the most challenging situation out of the 12 disciples, he just extended gratitude. And I certainly experienced that with my dad, because it shows you what your inner strength, that you have to tap into your reserves and your inner strength to get through stuff when you feel like you're banging your head against the wall. So if we do have this unification of purpose with the two forms of perception, whether that's ego or Holy Spirit, when you're 100% in, then you can look at stuff and just say, well, if it all falls under that umbrella in that bracket, then it's all going to engender gratitude, or it's all going to engender a sense of being a victim.
One of the most challenging teachings in the course is this idea that you can be grateful when you're attacked. And that shows you how extreme Jesus is with his enemy love teachings. And he demonstrated that at the end of his life. He was able to forgive. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was able to forgive hanging from the cross, brutally attacked, torn apart. And he's asking us for that same kind of love. And of course it feels impossible. I don't know how we could do that here. That's the ultimate example of egolessness. And it was the height of his teaching. But at the same time, having that as a goal of saying, you know what, if someone attacks me, I'm going to demonstrate that I can love anyway. That's part of what we're here to learn. And that's what the course is here to teach us. And so I think that is extreme. Obviously, it's extreme that you're attacked and you can be grateful. Just even saying it feels tough.
Yeah.
And it is, if we hold that as a model, even if we don't get all the way there, we are still going to be better for even having that as an ideal. And the world could use it, a lot more of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say too, I mean, case in point, you guys are here. I will say that I was told enough times growing up by different people that you are our public enemy and our competitor and all the things, and you know, all the things that I got in the emails before this. And I don't know. You can talk about how you felt, but I went to pick you up at the airport, and my prayer was, let me see oneness. I don't want to hear any of that stuff. I just want to see oneness. And you both got in my car, and I turned to look at you, and I had the funniest feeling. You came in, you said something funny, and it's like, oh my God, I didn't expect to like you so much. I thought this was going to be work. And over the next couple of days, it was pure joy of getting to know like an old friend. And then there were still things. Well, that's fine, but let's not ever go into business with them. That's, you know, all of the different things. But the love was just so big that everything else dissolves. There's trust, there's care. It doesn't mean that people will even stop saying, or even us in certain ways put our foot in our mouths about differences that we have or whatever, but that love does wash it. It really washes it. And I get like a kid excited, at Christmas when I get to see you guys. And I feel the same, about the people who come on to this webinar usually, but that's just what we're talking about in a very specific way.
Well, I'd love to speak to that, because I know maybe you have something to say as well, Robert, but our mission at the Circle is to help share A Course in Miracles with the world. And so your success in doing that is our success, because we are joined in common mission and common cause. And so that's always been how we see it. And our approach to the Foundation for Inner Peace version of the course is that at the end of the day, you're going to get the same message from both versions. I used the Foundation for Inner Peace version for decades, up until 2017 when the CE came out. At the end of the day, you're going to get a message that you were saying at the top of the hour: does this bring you closer to love? And so we've, at the level of the organization, I just want to reiterate, your success is our success. But on the personal level, Tam, I think you have been a breath of fresh air, because for the longest time, we have wanted a closer relationship with the foundation. And you coming on board and just throwing open your arms and not only saying, let's get together on Zoom, but like, let's get together in person, and welcoming us into your home has just been, as I said before, one of the greatest gifts for us of this year has been your friendship. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you. I think the key to that is that there really was an ego. Other people's stories, other people, and my mother didn't like confrontation. And she, as much as people might not understand this, she wasn't interested in community. She was interested in anchoring the course to the center of this world and doing that work and getting it out there as it was given to her to do. And when she heard community, it was exhausting, although she was the first person to say, hey, we should do a webinar. Hey, we should do a podcast. But she could do it home alone. And she was constantly entertaining. But at the same time, she was really an introvert, and by nature. So there was something about being given this material, where what I liked as a kid was, as I've said many times before, chasing my mother around the house and being as cranky and nasty as possible. And as soon as she turned to yell at me, I go, "You're not practicing the course." And I was a big lesson for her. But the same was true in coming into the course community and finding all these teachers saying things that I didn't find to be very kind about other teachers. And it made no sense to me, because even though I'd grown up in this, we'll call it a lineage of the course, and I heard the stories, it still didn't feel like practicing the course. And so that it just didn't make sense. And maybe, it's because I wasn't as deep enough course student, or I wasn't so my way or the highway in this. It wasn't my baby. I am taking care of like my brother after my mother's gone. Not, but I mean, meaning the course, it wasn't my whole life, even though it was in my life. And I think that that allowed me to be in a position that's a little different, for better and for worse, you know, in some areas. As far as I want to hold the integrity of what we do, but my ego isn't as strongly formed around it in the same way. It's
Yeah. I just want to, I think the versions thing is a total red herring. I wish everyone could just like get over the versions thing. You know, it need not be such a deal. So, you know, I just think the more we all can just relax about that, the better it is.
yeah. And say that we want A Course in Miracles in all of its versions out there for the world as much as possible, so
Yeah.
that people for whom it resonates, no interested in being a missionary, but for people for whom it resonates, can get access and not be confused about this version. It doesn't matter. Whichever one you are moved towards.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, interpretation issues are central for me, but they don't have to be personal. They don't have to be heated. You know, if you're in academia, it's just understood. Everyone's got different takes on things, and you can respect each other and be friends, and you can look at the data and you can dialogue. It needn't be a source of rancor and ire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what I'm getting more and more grateful for because I'm shown it everywhere. Someone I didn't like, suddenly, if I'm doing my practice, I suddenly kind of like them, even though I don't like them. And my aunt, my mother's sister, changed my life one day when I was in college, and I was visiting her because she lived in Boston, where I was going to college, in Wellesley, and she made meatloaf. And her husband said to her, my uncle said, "Why did you make meatloaf? You don't like it." And she said, "Every so often I'm in the mood for something I don't like." And that just hit me somewhere deep and allowed me to reframe a lot of things. And another friend had an incredibly ugly lamp collection. They were the ugliest lamps I'd ever seen. And that's what she was going for. And she gave me this tremendous appreciation and love for ugly. And so there are so many ways to let our mind go about our fixation, if it's not pretty, or if it's not, you know, our way of thinking, or any of it, to go, oh, look, another form of being in this world of illusion. It doesn't mean I want to spend a lot of time with someone who might want to kill me. But there is even like, wow, look how passionate that person is about that. You know, what's that from? And moving it through, and keep moving it through, and bringing it back to the love, which is what the Course teaches. So it's it really is. It really is also amusing. You know, that especially is very strident. Like, I loved Ken, but he could get very strident. And I even found that amusing, and passionate about that point of view. And, you know, for him, he was absolutely right, and very, very pure.
That's one thing I've learned from you, Tam, is that because there's a lot of pushback in this work, you know, anytime that you're doing anything front facing, public facing, you're going to have people who will disagree with you, and sometimes they'll disagree with you strongly. And I can have my mood dip whenever the pushback is strong. And I've learned from you we had a conversation about it, and you're like, I welcome it. I welcome the disagreement. I think it's an opportunity to engage in the kind of conversations that need to be had, and what's going to heal, but for us engaging with people that we disagree with. And so I've had a turnabout in the pushback that we receive, and I'm just thinking, an opportunity to engage and demonstrate these principles. So
So we can, as he says, if someone's attacking, they're calling for love. That can bring love into our awareness, and we can be grateful for that. Yeah, I mean, that's a high bar, but we can cultivate that.
It's kind of easier a little bit for me because I grew up in New York. And like I taught my son when we went to New York, and he was just a year or two, he was in his stroller, and I said, "You don't smile at people in New York." He said, "What do you do?" I said, "We grunt." So when people would walk by and they'd look at him like cute little baby, go, "Rrr," and they'd get the joke and they'd growl back. And it became this fantastic communication. New York baby visiting New York, he's told to grunt. The humor changes everything. It really, really does. And so anyone who writes and is very upset, if I can share the laughter without laughing at them, something happens usually. So I find that more interesting sometimes than all the people giving all the accolades. It's like, okay, thank you, but let's move through things.
Yeah, it diffuses quickly, humor.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So there was, I was just going to say, where is this? Okay, I have a question. Someone's question came through, and it was in before pre-webinar question that I just popped up on my screen. So I'm going to say it just because I find it interesting. It says, how can you maintain gratitude in a relationship where physical distance may not be an option and your own goals depend on the other person, e.g. creating a family, buying a home, etc.? My very quick answer, because I'm turning it over to you scholars, my quick answer is change your goals.
Well, what I would say, I mean, obviously, decisions need to be made in this world. Sometimes, we decide that it's time to move on. Sometimes we decide it's time to stay and learn the lessons that we're there to learn. But apart from those specific decisions, there is a wonderful teaching in that lesson we've referred to a few times, lesson 195, love is the way I walk in gratitude. And the teaching there is that gratitude is an aspect of love. So that where love is present, gratitude is going to automatically be there as well. And I think that in our relationships, our primary function is to cultivate love for that son of God, as the Course would say, regardless of what they do. Doesn't mean we say, I'm okay with this, doesn't mean we even stay. But our primary function, I think, is to cultivate love for that person. If we get there, gratitude comes along with that. And that does affect the other person. To some degree, they'll come along with us.
Yeah, even if it's just inside us.
But also, if you do your part in being that presence of love, one of two things will happen. I promise. Either the other person will respond to that love in you, because there's something just irresistible about love. So it is a diffuser as well. So you are in a loving place, they will respond to it, or external circumstances will change. Because I do believe that there is power in this work, and there's a plan. And when two people have learned all that they can learn from one another, then relationships do end. So it doesn't mean that you stay in a situation that isn't serving either one of you just to demonstrate the principles of love, but one of those two things will happen. Either the other person will come along, or external circumstances will change.
Leon, what do you have to say?
Well, I like to use the phrase "not for me." It's not for me. And I was in a long relationship for 23 years, and it reached a point where it was not for me. And in the most gentlest, kindest, noblest way that I could, I removed myself from that relationship. But you have to recognize where your field of influence ends. And love, it's interesting because if you think about being love, it's like love is all there is. What's all encompassing can have no opposite. So on that level, our choice is only really a pseudo choice, whether to actually see the love that's eternal or to not see it. And we know we've got all of these factors that weigh us down and stop us, whether it's simply being tired or activities in the world. But very early on in the course, it says the real purpose of the world is to correct your unbelief. So if you can reach this point where you say it's not for me, and I'll sometimes say to people, just picture yourself in a food hall and you're walking down an aisle and you might like tomatoes and you might not like cucumber. You don't hate the cucumber, you don't love the tomatoes more. It's just not for me, and you have to find that place beyond a hierarchy of illusions or a difficulty in miracles where you're judging things to have different degrees and different levels of meaning, and to just see that everything is to correct your unbelief. Everything can be something that you can be grateful for if you make no distinctions, like it says again in lesson 195, love makes no distinctions. It's an incredibly powerful thing to stop and rest with, because by making no distinctions, there's an equality to everything. So therefore, again, with the unification of purpose and the totality of perception, everything's either to keep you asleep, if you like, or to keep you awake. And asleep is just an imagined state anyway. It's like a pseudo choice. And if you can get to that place where you can say it's not for me in the same sort of clear, guiltless way that you would say cup of tea or cup of coffee, and you wouldn't feel bad for that. So if you found yourself in a relationship that is no longer serving you, and from my perspective, I left that relationship. It wasn't something I felt was ever going to be something that I did. And it was with a great sense of trepidation at times, but I kept my mind clear about it. And then within a few months, I entered another relationship, which has propelled me in the last sort of 7 or 8 years in ways that I could never have imagined and were never possible in the last relationship, because that was teaching me, that was almost like an example of a classroom of a special love relationship. Whereas now the counterpoint of that relationship is to just clear the interference, which again, I think is just the whole deal, really. It's like love's there, whether you see it or not. And we know that in some theoretical sense when we've got our feet up on the beach drinking a nice cool ice drink on a sunny day, but then you stick yourself in the middle of the busiest train station at the end of a long week. Will you see the love? The love's still there. The world's still only purpose is to correct your unbeliefs, but we navigate these two pathways, don't we, or seem to?
Yeah. I feel like when I said flippantly, I didn't mean to be flippant, change your goals. I just really meant if your goal is creating a family and buying a home, then it's not, your primary goal is not to be in the happy dream. And as a course student, usually that's more the goal is to see that you're one with God, see that you're love. And in that, I feel like this is going on the inside out. How do I fit God into my goals of getting a house and having a family? Which is not wrong, but part of it for me is like all of this now about people co-creating with God. And okay, I want a boyfriend that looks like this and acts like this and is dressed like that, and on. The list can go on, and they really can write things about it and put it out. But what personally, and I'm not saying anyone else has to do this, I have found after relationship or thing that I put out there that I wanted, I could somehow manifest so quickly, but I forget these little details about it. Like, yeah, and I don't want him to be a sociopath, or like it seemed like I just forgot these side little things to add in, and then I realized I can't ever remember how many side things to add in because I can't think of them all until I finally realized my prayer was, please give me what's best for me, what's best for my entire being. And even if that means having a miscarriage because I wanted a little girl more than anything in the world, the acceptance of that being what's best for me, and then watching my son, go get mani pedis with my mother and me, that's one of the reasons I wanted a girl, so that could happen, and all of it becoming so much more fluid and letting that happen. So if you're attached to a person because he'll give you or she'll give you these goals in life, there's just always backlash in some way or another. And if that's what you want to do and it's worth it, I know, when I was in my 30s and didn't have a kid, that was worth it. Like, okay, give me anyone, get anything, come on, I got to get this done. And then it took 6 years to get a kid for me. Just take a look at your goals and what they really are, especially as a course student. And your goals are fine, whatever they are, whatever pathway you choose. Just be aware of the truth within yourself about them as you practice a spiritual path, because it has a funny way of flipping on you. Yeah. How are we doing with everything, Celina?
We're doing great. We have about 10 minutes left, and holy moly, this has been a tremendous discussion. I have had many questions come through. We could talk for another hour and a half. I'm sure we could, but I do have a question that I'd like to go ahead and ask you from the Q&A to get at least one of these in. And all of you have done a beautiful job discussing gratitude, recognizing this as a pathway. And I think even you mentioned, Emily, about cultivating that love in a relationship. But someone asked, when gratitude is practiced, how important are emotions behind the intention of gratitude? Most go through emotions without the drive of emotion. How does one stimulate or create gracious emotion when it is lacking? Or is it needed?
Well, from the course's standpoint, it's always the roadway to emotion is thought. So we have to change our thinking about things, change our interpretation. If we can think about or perceive people or the situation in a different way, then gratitude would naturally follow. So to go back to that example about how we perceive attack, I will go ahead and read the quote. This is from the text, chapter 12, section 1. And it says, gratitude is due him, your brother, for both his loving thoughts and his appeals for help. And that appeals for help, as I think we know, is code for attack. So gratitude is due him for his attack, which are appeals for help. For both the loving thoughts and the appeals for help are capable of bringing love into your awareness if you perceive them truly. So this is something I was so struck by when we did the workshop 3 years ago that I promptly forgot. But the idea is, if I am seeing attack, I can reinterpret that as an appeal for help, and that reinterpretation will bring love into my awareness, and that will bring gratitude. So it's always, to get to the emotion is to change of thought or a change of perception, which is a pretty remarkable idea in the case I'm talking about.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, and again, love makes no comparison. So again, just to echo that, it's just like we're the one who makes the judgment or the distinction if we make a differentiation between an expression of love or a call for love, because the underlying substrate is just the one reality. And you go back to the introduction, what is all encompassing can have no opposite. And there's so much depth and so much of a full picture in that short sentence that we're all so used to, because it's right at the beginning of the book, but it's the whole thought system. It's like it's all contained in that sentence, because if you don't judge, which is projecting your own belief in a meaning onto what's there, then you'll see that all that's there is love in a form of like even in the form of fear, because behind the fear, behind the call for love, as we call it, or the attack, is love. Once mind reaches to itself, as it says in the Course. God knows not form. It's just love is, and we cease to speak.
I'm curious as to whether there's any pushback to this idea of attack, being grateful for someone's attack. Normally, when we talk about this in classes and whatnot, there's always a, but what about this? And how can we be expected to hold that perspective in this world that's so cruel?
And you're always like, just leave them.
And what?
You're always like, leave them.
Oh, like the, well, I definitely, I try and be very clear that if you're in a relationship that is abusive in any form, then the loving thing is not to stay. But at the same time, I think there, as Leon was saying, there's a way in which you can leave, and you can leave a relationship that is no longer working with love. But I just appreciate, I have a deep appreciation for how difficult it is to do the work that Jesus is asking us to do.
Yeah, I mean,
Truly.
I have to say that the idea that I can be grateful for an attack that I've reinterpreted as an appeal for help, which brings love into my awareness, that's a high bar. And I don't have that in
Yeah.
mind over the course of a day.
Yeah.
But it would be great to do that.
Yeah, there's one of our favorite quotes in the Course is, those who attack are poor, their poverty asks for gifts. So those who attack are spiritually poor. They couldn't attack if they weren't in that place of spiritual poverty. And so our job is to give them the gift of our love versus further attack. And it's one thing to understand that at an intellectual level. It's another thing to actually do it when you're being attacked. And so I think he's just calling, I'm always struck by the kind of people he's calling us to be, and what a different world we would have if we could be these people.
And one
So
of the things, excuse me, but it's saying my computer is about to cut off because I don't have any more battery. But one of the things that's really important to remember is to have compassion for your body, because your body feels attacked. And so sometimes you can override that and go, okay, well, I'm going to be loving this situation. And afterwards you crash because your body's so used to being wired in a neural pattern to experience something as a flight or fight, or there was a third one, staying and just putting up with something. So it's important to even bring that in a daily way. I know we're not our bodies, but boy, you can certainly feel it when you get sick. It's really hard to go, not my body. So if there's a way to temper it and love it through your forgiveness process and you're dealing with some abusive energy, to keep breathing and be aware, okay, I am going to do this practice and include this part too, without it getting hurt.
Tan, that was so true. And Emily and Robert, that was beautifully said. I'm just going to share this quickly because this happened to me like the day before the election, so within the last couple of weeks. But my partner and I recently bought a home, and we share this home, and we were attacked by one of our neighbors. So when I say that, I mean, we had a very disgruntled neighbor who came to the door. I'll try to keep this short because it can be kind of a long story. But he came to the door and he was very upset at a landscaper that we had hired to clean up our property, a house that we're going to sell. And so, I'm only sharing this because of how I used it and how I was able to come back to it later. First of all, I can tell you that this man found our new home 2 miles away, came to the home, rung on the doorbell several times, opened the door. As soon as I opened the door, he was screaming, pointing his finger. I mean, it really seemed insane to me. And screaming about, oh, how can you do this? And we were like, calm down, whoa, 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 calm down. What's going on, right? So, but I'm trying to paint this picture. It was a lot more detailed than that. And he said a lot of expletives and things to us, but he was a man who was enraged. And Joe and I, my partner and I, we handled it the best way we could, knowing what we knew at the time, had him calm down, dealt with the situation. But at one point, it felt so violating, as you can imagine, coming over to this house and screaming at us. And I have my elderly mother in the kitchen, and I remember just being like, okay, like feeling like this fire of protection, like coming up in me, which I now understand it to be fear, right? But I mean, he was so off the wall that, at one point I said, you know what? You came over uninvited, unannounced, screaming at us at our new house. I said, don't you ever do that again. And he came up and he said a whole bunch of other things to me. So the reason I'm telling you this is because we have not had an experience like that before. And in reflecting on it later, and also being a course student, it reminded me about how we can even forgive the situation if not even right in that moment. Okay, I felt very fiery and it was very upsetting. Now, I will say, having practiced the course for so many years, I handled it way better now than I would have 10 or 15 years ago. But it is in that continued practice. And it is everything that you all have been saying about coming into this space of compassion and remind, when I looked at him and in his eyes, I saw rage. And that rage reminded me of the fear that the collective ego is feeling. I had so much compassion for him later. We did what we did in the way of the world. We actually even had to make a police report. It was sort of a drawn out thing. But in reflecting it, I learned from it. And also I learned about myself, because this gentleman in the script who came up to our home made me realize, what is coming up in me? What is that fear that's coming up in me? Now, I reacted to it, like I said, differently than I would have years ago, but still I used it. And I could go into a place of non-judgmental awareness and hold us together in the same light. So just wanted to share that.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I know we have to stop.
Yes.
I did one thing before that, which is I didn't realize how much, because I saw some comments on the side in the chat, how many people were feeling guilty for taking your webinars and podcasts and ours and Foundation for Inner Peace one as well.
Interesting.
And I've heard this too, they didn't want to admit it. And I hope that we can, if nothing else, dispel that guilt and say, yes, the more you can get of this material, the more that you resonate with it, the better we'll all be.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason to take it all in and
come out of the closet, people.
Use what serves you and brings you closer to love. I mean, if we're hanging out behind the scenes, everyone, so you can all attend both webinars because we're hanging together ourselves, so you can hang with us too.
So yes, no guilt around practicing A Course in Miracles, because that's what you're doing. But all the guilt in the world while you practice Course in Miracles, because that's what it's here to help dispel. So thank you each. And Leon, it's kind of like you came in as Switzerland or something, Right? Thank you.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I had the course for 27 years before I even knew about anything globally. I met 3 or 4 people in 27 years who also had the course. And then in 2020, during lockdown, this crazy thought landed in my head, like, I wonder what would happen if I Googled A Course in Miracles. So yeah, I am late to the party in that sense, and I had a very just isolated experience with the course. But although my version's always been the foundation version, when I discovered the other versions and discovered there was an article that you did, Robert, where you're talking about the value of being a course purist. And that was incredibly helpful for me because I do like to dine at the buffet and sort of take Rupert Spira and Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj and Alan Watts and Michael Singer and wherever my leanings take me. And I'm interested in the sciences and neuroscience and Bernardo Kastrup and Donald Hoffman. It could be a long old list, but there was a point where that influence of that article helped me to hone in again and just not lose sight of the fact that my primary language is A Course in Miracles. So I've been benefited from both sides, and I don't see sides, and I just see a unification of purpose where everything that exists is to awaken us to the reality that love is all there is.
Mm. Yeah, on that note, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Having us.
And I've been inspired to end this in a little bit different of a way than we traditionally end our webinars. And I would just like to read this quote from the course, and we'll have a quiet moment and say goodbye. This is from lesson 189, which is, I feel the love of God within me now. And it says this: simply do this, be still, and lay aside all thoughts of what you are and what God is, all concepts you have learned about the world, all images you hold about yourself. Empty your mind of everything it thinks is either true or false, or good or bad, of every thought it judges worthy, and all the ideas of which it is ashamed. Hold on to nothing. Do not bring with you one thought the past has taught, nor one belief you have ever learned before from anything. Forget this world, forget this course, and come with holy, empty hands unto your God.
Thank you, Celina. And may everyone who celebrates Thanksgiving also remember forgiving.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Be well.